By now you should be familiar with the basic principles of public speaking, but now we're going to talk about delivering your speech. Speech anxiety is the number one fear among Americans, so knowing how to deliver an effective speech is important. As a side note, if you struggle with speech anxiety, look at Chapter 2 in your Practically Speaking textbook for some strategies to overcome your fears. Let's take a look at some strategies for delivering an effective public speech. Click the arrow to advance to the next slide. There are 4 ways that speakers can deliver a speech. Each method has pros and cons. The first is a manuscript, which is read word for word. This is typically used when precise wording is important or when the speaker is worried about legalities. The downside is that the audience can tell that it isn't natural, and they might question if the words are actually your own. Second is a memorized speech. This is obviously a speech that is delivered without any notes. The danger here is that you might forget something important. As the manuscript speech, you run the risk of looking unnatural. On the downside, a speaker who has memorized their speech can maintain eye contact throughout. Third is the impromptu speech, which is essentially delivered without any preparation. The speech can sound very natural, but you might stumble over your words. Here's a tip. If you think there's any possibility that you might be asked to speak, think about what you might say so you're not totally unprepared. Extemporaneous speaking is what you will do in this course. You prepare your speech ahead of time, deliver with notes of keywords and phrases, but since you've practiced, it sounds spontaneous and natural. The best way to be successful with this is to practice in front of friends and family. Next, we're going to talk about how to manage your body and space for competent delivery. Click the arrow to advance to the next slide. Becoming a competent speaker is more than just writing and delivering your speech. You have to appear as a credible speaker. This is your ethos, which in Latin means how your audience perceives your reputation. Competent speakers make eye contact with their audience members. Scan the room, but try not to stare at any one person. Use variety in your voice, vary your tone, pitch, volume, etc. to add interest and keep your audience's attention. Avoid fillers like etc. These are a natural part of our dialect and are impossible to remove completely. However, when they are excessive, they become distracting. The best way to limit these is to prepare and practice your speech ahead of time so you don't have to stop and think about your words. Instead, use unfilled pauses, which will create dramatic effect and allow the audience to consider what you're saying. Next, be sure to articulate and pronounce words correctly. Few things can damage your ethos like a mispronounced word. Click on the link in this slide to visit a website that outlines the 100 most commonly mispronounced words. Finally, move intentionally and avoid distracting behaviors. We all have certain habits that we might not even be aware of. Sometimes we play with our hair, point at people, snap our fingers. We can easily ignore these things, but they might be distracting to your audience. Avoid distracting behaviors like these by moving intentionally. Do not pace, but walk naturally around your space. This also helps you connect with audience members around the room, especially if your space is large. That's it for Chapter 10. Click the arrow to advance to the next slide. All right, let's check up on what you've learned so far. Can you name the methods of competent speech delivery? What are their benefits? What are their drawbacks? What kind will you be using in this class? Have you ever watched a recording of yourself speaking? Consider your known areas of weaknesses and set goals to start working on them one at a time. As you learned in Chapter 1 with the rhetorical situation, a speech is nothing if you don't have an audience to listen to it. Let's take a look at some strategies for getting your audience to listen to you. Click the arrow to advance to the next slide. Gaining the audience's attention is important. Having this skill can make almost any topic interesting to your audience. Our society is becoming more and more interested in fast facts. Tell me exactly what I need to know in the fewest words possible so I can move on with my life. Our attention spans have decreased rapidly over the last several years, and the average adult's time on task is about 15 minutes. At this time, most people need a break and to do something else before they can listen to any more information. If you can get your audience's attention at the outset, you are more likely to maintain their attention. It is very difficult to gain attention halfway through a speech. Let's talk about attention. Click the arrow to advance to the next slide. Attention is defined as the act of focusing on a specific stimulus to the exclusion of competing stimuli. Think about all of the competing stimuli that we deal with in our everyday life. I bet, as you're listening to my presentation, your phone is dinging with text messages from your friends and family. Maybe your children are vying for your attention. Perhaps you're making dinner, or maybe your eyes are closing and sleep is calling your name. We have what is called selective attention, which means we cannot pay attention to two things at the same time. We think we can multitask, but we can't. We cannot watch a show and study effectively at the same time. We cannot text and drive and do both well. If we want our audience to truly listen and not just hear us, they have to do so actively, not passively. If you cannot get your audience to listen, your speech will lack excitement and inspiration and will soon be forgotten. So, how do you get your audience to listen actively? The very first sentence of your speech should get their attention and make the speech personally relevant to them. Monroe's motivated sequence says you must get their attention first, then show them that there is a strong need. Both of these things should happen in the first minute or two of your speech, or you've already lost them. As a listener, you can take notes during the speech. This guarantees active listening. Click the arrow to go to the chapter checkup. Think about what you can do as a speaker to make your speech more interesting. As an audience member, what can you do to be a more mindful listener? Think about these things, take a minute and write down some notes, then click the arrow to advance to the next slide. That does it for delivering your speech and getting the audience's attention. If you have any questions about what we've discussed in this presentation, please don't hesitate to contact me either by email, a phone call, or shoot me a text message.